Welcome to this explainer. We're going to dive right into a really fascinating and, honestly, deeply impactful text today, Humanitarian Experience and Logic by Lang-Jensen. We'll be unpacking how a field-tested mindset, what's known as humanitarian logic, can actually help us fundamentally transform rigid, bureaucratic welfare systems. The goal here is to figure out how we can shift them from being these cold, technical treatment apparatuses into warm, human-centered, relational networks. And, this is absolutely crucial in fields like mental health and psychosocial support. In those spaces, prioritizing human dignity and local anchoring isn't just a nice-to-have. It is literally the only way to create real, lasting change. So let's start with a stark dilemma drawn straight from the author's frontline experience. I want you to picture this. You're in a refugee reception camp, and there's a sudden food shortage. More people have arrived than there is food to go around. So what do? Do you give everyone smaller portions, or do healthy adults get less just so the sick can receive their standard rations? The psychological weight of a choice like that is just crushing. You are looking directly into the eyes of vulnerable people, and you have to weigh their immediate, urgent needs against a rigid system of standardized care. When resources are that scarce, how do you act fairly when literally every single option has severe consequences? Now, this might be the ultimate humanitarian dilemma, but it actually perfectly mirrors the quiet, everyday crises faced by social workers and mental health practitioners in our own modern welfare systems. All right, let's get into Section 1, the technical system paradox, metrics versus meaning. There is this profound paradox in modern care, and it basically builds a giant bureaucratic wall right between the practitioner and the messy reality of the people they're actually trying to serve. On one side, we have the technical treatment apparatus that's driven by your KPIs, standardized categories, and transactional agreements. But on the other side, we have the relational system, and that is built on trust, localized care, and mutual insight. The thing is, the relentless push from donors and administrations for standardized KPIs fundamentally clashes with the nuanced relational reality that's required to actually heal people. Imagine a mental health worker treating severe trauma. If their success is measured purely by how fast they can process cases to meet a monthly quota, well, the patient is suddenly reduced to a mere data point. When we start treating human beings strictly as categories on a spreadsheet, we completely lose the absolute essence of care. You have to hear this profound realization from Soka, a Cambodian NGO worker who's featured pretty prominently in the source material. Soka really exposes how donor-driven metrics act merely as business transactions, rather than true human partnerships. He points out that with donors, it's a strict exchange, right? They give money, the NGO provides a service, and then they report back. End of story. But with the local villages, there is mutual insight. So if we want our welfare and mental health systems to actually work, they absolutely must transition from being these rigid business agreements to genuine partnerships built on deep mutual understanding. Moving on to Section 2, the Humanitarian Logic, a mindset for navigating complex responsibility. To overcome this whole technical paradox, the author outlines 5 cornerstones of humanitarian logic. And it's important to note these aren't rigid rules, they're really a mindset. They are relational continuity, relational integrity, foresight, fairness and equity, and communication as responsibility. These 5 cornerstones offer us a philosophical blueprint. They show us exactly how to yank systems like mental health and psychosocial support away from those cold spreadsheets and pull them back toward actual human connection and shared responsibility. If we take a closer look at that first cornerstone, relational continuity, we find this incredibly powerful definition. Trust is not a resource you use, it's a structure you build over time. Think about a highly vulnerable individual seeking psychosocial support only to have a completely different social worker assigned to them every 3 weeks. I mean, why would they ever open up? In any welfare system, consistently showing up for people is literally the only way to build the trust necessary to create real change. Soka actually mentions that if practitioners aren't there for people over a sustained period of time, trust disappears entirely and communities just simply stop sharing their real problems with you. Which brings us to Section 3, trust and local anchoring, knowledge rooted in the community. Listen to this incredibly honest perspective from Soka. He says, I help those I can live with helping. If I feel something, I act on it. It's so raw. Soka's approach reveals that true anchoring comes from acting on a localized moral compass, rather than just checking off a distant system's rigid target criteria. He explains that relationships dictate action in the real world. You help based on authentic connection and trust, not just because a remote donor in another country defined a specific target demographic on a piece of paper. And this brings us to a really fascinating tension highlighted in the text. Local realities often totally contradict international ideals of neutrality and impartiality. The author argues that strict impartiality is, in many ways, a privilege of those without real relationships or obligations. Genuine support, on the other hand, requires fairness and equity based on actual lived connections. It's about treating people fairly based on real visible needs right there in the community, rather than trying to act like a perfectly detached, neutral robot. Let's look at Section 4, Dignity for Both Parties, Protecting the Client and the Practitioner. This brings us to a vital transformation. We have to design a system that protects absolutely everyone involved. In fields like mental health and psychosocial support, the system obviously must protect the patient, ensuring their human dignity and preventing them from becoming just another KPI number. But, and this is huge, it equally must protect the practitioner. When social workers or medical staff are forced to prioritize arbitrary metrics before honest relational care, they suffer massive burnout and profound moral injury. By embracing relational systems, we don't just help the patient, we preserve the practitioner's moral compass and actively protect their mental well-being too. Now, this dual protection relies heavily on the second cornerstone we mentioned, relational integrity. Look, good intentions are simply not enough. Responsibility for consequences matters, and that demands absolute honesty. To protect both sides, practitioners have to be empowered by their organizations to practice relational integrity. This means you only promise what the system can actually deliver, no exceptions. It means never sugarcoating reality and never, ever faking data just to satisfy an auditor's spreadsheet. This concept completely reorients our entire view of welfare. Soka points out that providing a small financial grant or a clinical intervention is not just about the cash or the steps. It's about looking someone in the eye and saying, "I trust you, I believe in you." Providing aid or psychosocial treatment without preserving the recipient's dignity is fundamentally harmful. Dignity isn't just some nice byproduct of care. It absolutely must be the vehicle through which all support is delivered. Finally, Section 5, From System to Relation, Scaling the Paradigm Shift. So, how do we actually scale these grassroots insights into actionable systemic changes? Well, we have to recognize that whether you're coordinating a massive refugee camp operation or just running a local mental health clinic, development without local roots creates activity, sure, but not necessarily positive change. The system must be built alongside the people it serves. It has to be deeply rooted in their reality, not just imposed upon them from the outside as some cold technical apparatus. How do we pull this off? The text outlines 4 key steps for transforming the system. Number 1, ensure true local ownership, where external actors mentor rather than dictate. Number 2, build long-term relational partnerships, moving way beyond short-term projects. Number 3, transition to transparent needs-based funding that stops chasing PR metrics. And number 4, trust and empower the capacity of local practitioners. These last 2 are so deeply connected. When organizations finally stop forcing their practitioners to chase superficial PR metrics for funding, they immediately free up those local workers to use their actual capacity to build the long-term trust that truly heals communities. So I'll leave you with this final thought to ponder as we wrap up this explainer. Take a hard look at your own daily work, your own organization, or your clinic. How can you shift the balance away from rigid transactional metrics and get back to genuine human connection? How can you actively protect the dignity of both the people you serve and the people providing the care? It's a big challenge, but a necessary one. Thank you so much for exploring this vital mindset with us today.